Hello, good morning, Ken.
Good morning, Gary.
As always, it's great to see you,
You too.
and I hope you're keeping well.
I'm okay. I'm okay, mate.
Excellent. Yeah, we just wanted to be able to hopefully not put you on the spot, but kind of ask you a few questions today that have kind of I've been thinking about, your own life and what you've been through and different things. And so I just wanted to put it to you today about people who have influenced you in your life to get you to where you are today, because I know you've heard some of my story and some of
Yeah.
my testimony. So I'm
Yeah.
really interested to find out, and I'm sure
Okay.
other people who'll be listening to this and who know you along the way, they'll be interested to know what kind of people and which people have influenced you in
Mhm.
your journey over
Okay.
the years.
Well, that's good. Yeah. It's interesting when you look back and you can sort of see a thread, can't you? But when you're in it,
Mm,
you don't see that thread at all. But my upbringing was quite different to yours as you've described it, because it was very, very, very settled. I was in the same house with mum and dad and brother and sister until, in the same bedroom. In fact, I was born at home.
wow.
And I was still in that same bed when I was about 17. I mean, we changed the sheets, but it was the same. So it was incredibly settled. And then when I was
Mm,
at 7, I joined the local Anglican church choir. And so that
wow.
sort of brought me into church life in a new way. My parents weren't really religious, but I think I
Mm,
went because my friend did or something. But I started on with the church choir, and I met the vicar, the Reverend Philip Hacking, and he was the first one, I would say, because he was a good guy. I didn't know that he was like he'd written books and that he was the convener of the Keswick Convention, which is a big deal in those
mm,
days. I think it still is. And so he had a very wide preaching ministry, but he really impacted me to. I tell you, it was. There's one thing that comes to mind. Every Christmas, the choir boy, I was the head choir boy by then, so I guess I'd be about 9 or 10 or something. And you had to do a reading at Christmas, at the Christmas service. And
mm,
the first reading was Genesis 12. I'll take you from your country to a place where you don't know. I'm putting my hand
mm.
on you, Abraham. It was the call of Abraham. And so the vicar wanted to make sure that I understood what I was reading before I read it.
Wow.
So he took me into his study a bit, and I read it through, and he's taking a job very seriously, wasn't he? Little lad reading it out, and he said, "Do you understand what it means, Kenneth?" And I said, "Well, God's calling him to do something." And he leaned forward and he said, "Yes, maybe God's calling you to do something." And
Mm,
it gave me chills, and it was a really interesting encounter
yeah.
because it was a brand new idea to me. So I was a happy, settled little boy, but the idea that God would take me somewhere where I might not be happy or settled,
Mm,
but
yeah.
just in the sense of that commitment. So that was he was a great preacher, and I always enjoyed his preaching. Even I remember some of the sermons from over 50 years later. So he was great, but that was the number one. It was that message about, are you? And I'd never heard anything like it, that God might have a plan for your life, and
That's
that He might be
fantastic.
directing you in a new way. Yeah.
Wow. So that kind of sparked open the possibilities
Well, it does. I mean, I
that
can
you
see it looking
growing up
back.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back, I see it. At the time, uh, okay, I probably muffed my lines even as it was. but but then even when I was 14, I think the
Mm,
the young people in the Anglican church where I was, this is in Sheffield, Christchurch,
mm,
Fulwood in Sheffield, the young people were drifting to a more exciting evangelical church,
mm.
down the road. So I went as well. You know,
Ah,
and of
okay.
course my voice had broken, and so I wasn't in the choir anymore. And so just before I started to drift, so I went. So this was the Church of the Nazarene in
Oh,
Sheffield, in Sheffield.
right. Yeah.
And this was my number two guy, which was the Reverend Leslie Evans, and
Oh,
he's still with us. I think he's in his must be in his early 90s now, I think.
wow.
But
Yeah.
he was just a great teacher of the Bible, and he was quite a quiet guy in a sense. And but he'd speak with this passion of like saying, "I am convinced," and he's, you know, I'd like to put it on record. You know, he just really staked himself on the scripture.
Yeah.
And so we used to go and listen to a Bible study on a Wednesday night, and it'd be thronged. So there'd be a group of old people, older people, probably in their 40s, the older people around the edge, and then us young ones would sit in the middle. And I'd never have the nerve to particularly say anything, but I'd listen and drink it in. So I'd be, I guess, 14 or 15 now, and then listening to this. And so he used to allow people to speak their piece and to talk at it, and then he'd bring it together at the end, and then just give a word about it. But I loved his preaching. He'd take big chunks, like a whole chapter, and then
Wow.
work through it, and you know, preach for about an hour or so. But it was just, and I'd be taking notes and thinking it through. So he was the big influence to, I guess, the sense of like your intellect and your mind could be at the service of God. You know, like you were preaching the other Sunday when you said about being passionate, and you said love the Lord your God with all your mind, and that's the big gift that guy gave to me, was that I could actually love God by my mental thinking, my creative intellect, using my imagination and my intellect to serve the Lord in that way.
I think that's fantastic because at that age, it's that age that your mind is like a sponge almost. It's taking
Yeah.
in that information, and it's got a hunger and a thirst for knowledge and all these kinds. So at that age, it's perfect for him to be able to pour into you, and
Yeah.
almost set the stage for your foundation of thinking, foundation of intellect, based on a Christian theology and based on a Christian
Mm.
revelation, if you like,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know. So
yeah. They were
that's
two
I
great
can see
teachers.
why
Mm.
Leslie would be such an amazing person in your life to have that impact and influence on you at such an early age.
Yeah, yes, very. Now I mustn't give the impression that it's all a nice, easy thing. I was
Progression.
I was just capable of being really stupid, you know, and making terrible choices and
Mm,
daft choices. One of the daft choices was to run away and get married when I was 17, which was
wow.
not a great choice really, looking back, because I was just so immature, and you know,
Wow.
and that was an awful like mess. And then stuff with drink and drugs comes in, irrespective
Mm.
of. And I don't think I was an out and out hypocrite, but was, it, you know, the church life just sort of faltered. I'm just talking about people who influenced me, but so there
Yeah.
was all this kind
Yeah.
of chaos, you know. And then when I got divorced to this young lady, that was a traumatic event.
Mm.
I remember some years later, I was giving testimony, and I just happened to say, and I got divorced. And then somebody
Mm.
shouted out from the church, from the congregation, that the Lord hates divorce, which was really mean. It was really
Oh
mean.
no.
Now, of course, as you know, it says that in the Bible, but there's
Yeah.
always it's the appropriate time to say things, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it wasn't helpful. But so I said, I think this was from the I said, I agree with you. I think the Lord does hate divorce. The Lord hates every breakdown in relationship. He hates it,
Amen.
but he
Yeah.
loves divorcees. He loves divorcees because he loves me. So
Absolutely.
you know, so it's great. So I think that I was knocked aback a lot and hurt,
Mm,
and I also was hurtful, I'm sure, you know, in many ways. You know, it goes both ways, doesn't
yeah.
it? But it was a wreck. And then there was another part of the same sort of era when uh, my best friend committed suicide, and that was just such a shock and a suffering. It was a kind of a terrible, terrible thing. And again, I never talked about it for you. And then one time I felt impelled to
Mm,
start to talk about it. So I did it. I was in a church and I started to talk about this guy committing suicide. And his brother was in the congregation, but I didn't know. And that
wow.
made it the one time I kind of brought it forward, this awful thing, this awful. He was actually the funniest guy I've ever met. He was a real
Mm,
Liverpool comedian. He was just hilarious, you know. But there was something that was had gone astray in his brain there. Yeah. Anyway, that was. I'm just trying to say it wasn't all plain sailing all the way.
no, no, I
Yeah,
understand. It's good to let us know, like, you've got these influences, you've got these people that influence you, and possibly you may feel the same way as I did, that while these seeds are being sown, that they're not going to waste. Because I find in myself, and I don't want to talk about me today, but I found in my life that these seeds that have been sown were for a perfect time later on. That
yeah,
even though I'd made mistakes and I'd done these things wrong,
yeah.
the seeds that were sown were later going to flourish, were later going to be watered and grown. Did you find that that was the same for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, definitely so. It's funny you've got this kind of this stuff going on here that's remains bad. It's you're never going to say it's good, but
No.
there's something underneath. Yeah, that there's something
Yeah.
underneath. Yeah. So the second guy, Mr. Evans, Leslie Evans, was the one who encouraged me to go to college, and I got a degree, and that led into then a master's and then a PhD, and so completely going into loving God with my mind. But there was one, so he it got that journey going, you know, really intellectual, but there was something else, and that's number three, was that when I
Mm,
was going through this breakdown, I met the third guy, and this was, and I'd really quite gone into a meltdown by now with various things. So I was living,
mm,
well, homeless actually. I was homeless and living in Brighton
yeah.
and busking for a
Mm,
living. And a girl came up and started talking to me. And I saw these guys at the other side of the precinct where I was playing, and they were standing in a huddle praying together. And I have to say, I've never seen anybody praying outside of a church before, ever. I'd never heard anybody speaking in tongues. I'd never seen anything like it. So these guys were with YWAM. It was a YWAM group, and they
mhm.
were in the middle of Brighton on the street, and in a little huddle, and they were praying. I thought, what in the world is? And I just thought it was absolutely insane. I just thought it was
Yeah.
crazy. And they started talking to me, and I found myself weeping,
Yeah.
and uh, and it was like, anyway. So one of them invited me. They said, "Look, come on back with us. Come on back with us." And so it started a journey back. And then because I was homeless, I had nowhere particularly to go. So I went up to their church, which was way up in Barnoldswick. Okay. And then I met number three. So, I mean, I had a number of things that I needed to put right. I needed to put some things right that I'd done
Mm,
wrong. And so I started off on a journey after meeting this YWAM group. And
mm,
after I'd done my little things, one of them was I'd stolen some money. It was so I sort of from a firm. So I felt like I ought to go to the manager of the firm and apologize and offer to put it. There's just small things like this. Anyway, so I went up to the church in Barnoldswick, and this was an independent charismatic fellowship. And the pastor there, Brian Lingard, was
right.
a powerful influence on my life because
Mm,
I'd got this kind of intellectual journey going on, but he put this spiritual dimension into it. This it's a Pentecostal church, so it's like this other side of it,
Yeah.
and so I spent some years there. And that's where I met my wife Val.
Oh,
We got married, and we went from there and started to journey together. We were having children, and then we fostered children, and then so we had about 30 kids, and then going from about 12 different churches, and then started like writing books and expanding, and then working in colleges. So we've spread out a lot.
yeah.
But Brian's influence on my life was very, very personal, because it connected the different things, right? This sense of summoning from my vicar when I was a kid, and then this sense of love the Lord your God with all your mind from Leslie Evans, and then this sense of like, how do you do it? Well, all this mess needs to be fixed. All this stuff needs to come into order, and I have to know the love of God and the passion of God and the driving operating energy of the Holy Spirit. And that's what it came together for me. Yeah, that's what Brian brought to me. He still does. I think he must be in his early 90s now, but he's still
Wow.
Hi, morning, Brian.
As you're speaking and you're saying about love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, I'm thinking like the first person kind of awakened your soul to
Yeah,
the possibility. The
yeah,
second person kind of opens your mind. And the third person, Brian, kind of brought the love of God into your heart.
yeah,
And the three together connected as one, and you were able to then be launched into your destiny and launched into the plan of God for your life with those three things fully connected. Does that make a bit of sense?
he does. It sounds great when you say it. Yeah, sounds like it's
Yeah.
all planned. Isn't that amazing? No, it does. It feels very
How God
coherent,
does
doesn't it?
things.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm thinking of that scripture that all things work for our good, how it all
amen.
works around and brings about the plan of God. That what we see sometimes as a bit of a disaster or a failure or
Yeah,
whatever, nothing's wasted. He uses all of that and brings it about, but he uses the right people at the right time to kind of nudge us in the right direction.
amen, amen. I love that moment in Psalm 23 when it says, "He restores my soul."
Yes, yeah.
Restores, he restores, and that the enemy breaks up or fragments, he pieces it back together again. He restores
Yeah.
my soul lovingly, he restores my life. Yeah, thank you, Lord.
Fantastic. And I'm so inspired by your life and what I've heard so far and the things you've done and it's great to be able to see the testimony of what God's done because it lets people like myself see that it's possible. Let myself see that, listen, the same kind of aspirations and dreams and things that you pursued and also achieved and accomplished, I can do for me.
Absolutely, mate.
I've been a broken man. I've been
Sure.
had issues and problems, but with your achievements and what God's done in your life, it's very inspiring. It's very helpful, and
Mm.
I take a lot away from that. And it's good to be able to sometimes come to you and pick your brain and ask questions and find out how did you do that.
Oh, well, you don't want to go that way. Thanks, mate. Bless you. All right.
I have another question before we go then, if that's all right. Do you ever find yourself taking on some of the people that have influenced your life, some of perhaps their bit? Because the reason I'm asking is when I say, for instance, when I preach, people say you're so much like such
Oh,
and such,
yeah, yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
much like as so you know, I'm so much like the person who was my pastor for many years, had a massive influence on my life. Would you say that's the same for you? You take on some of their kind of characteristics or behaviors?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yes. If I take on some of their sermons.
Yeah, me too.
I remember things, as I say, that Reverend Philip Hacking was preached all those years ago in Sheffield, and then Mr. Evans as well. Some of his sermons, yeah,
Mm,
but particularly I think with Brian Lingard, it's more his manner and the way he brought his love and passion into play, and also
yeah,
working
yeah,
in the power of God. That to me, that created so that's what I take from him
right.
particularly. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, that's
yeah.
right. All different gifts and different things. But sure, I'd be proud to be a clone of the of any of those. Yeah, bless you.
Yeah, yeah, same here. Thanks for sharing, Ken. It's been an
Amen.
absolute privilege to be able to listen to your heart and share your heart. And I'm sure everyone else that's listening and watching is blessed to be inspired by your life and the people that have inspired you along the
Thanks so
way.
much, mate. Bless you.